This was a drone strike. 55 million people.
That's now pouncing on the president's willingness to testify under
Shakeup at Uber. U.S. military.
In the heyday of the three-network dominance of news, you had a deadline once a day. Then, with the advent of satellites and cable, it's a deadline every hour. Now, with the advent of the internet, it's a deadline every second.
The web never stops, and the world never sleeps entirely.
By and large, people get their news off the little instruments, off the iPhone or off an iPad or social media.
The beginnings of this connected, instantaneous world can be found in the work and life of a man you may never have heard of.
Lowell Thomas, in many ways, was a founder of electronic journalism as we know it.
I grew up out in the middle of South Dakota, small town, didn't have television, but we had Lowell Thomas.
In the 1930s, Lowell Thomas hosted the most listened to radio newscast and the most popular newsreel, bringing the news of the world to Americans. Journalism was transformed as for the first time, Americans shared the same news at the same time.
The intimacy of the radio, of hearing a Lowell Thomas talk about faraway places with strange-sounding names. Radio took you there.
Lowell Thomas reported stories from India, Alaska, Afghanistan, Antarctica, Tibet, Arabia, seemingly everywhere.
I wanted to have an adventurous life, and he was the model for that.
There was something very Hemingway-esque about Lowell Thomas. He was a great adventurer, but he was also a great storyteller.
And wow, what a storyteller he was.
100 years ago, the journalist Lowell Thomas told the story of and created one of the first media superstars, Lawrence of Arabia, still mythic today.
And dines out on Lawrence of Arabia for the next decade or so. I mean, he made that guy.
In 1949, as Chinese communist troops prepared to invade Tibet, a journalist took a caravan all the way into the country's otherwise closed capital, Lhasa, where no other American journalist had ever been. There, he met the young Dalai Lama.
I was just too young. I very much impressed. The Lowell Thomas, his voice, very strong voice, and quite a big nose.
The voice of a traveler, adventurer, storyteller, and seminal journalist. The first voice ever to command the whole country's attention. He brought the world to America in a way that had never been possible before. He helped America shoulder its new responsibilities in that world. His was the voice of America.
Good evening, everybody.
He spoke with a strong set of American values, values he picked up in a Colorado gold rush town filled with bars, prostitutes, and miners.
I was associated with picturesque men, nearly all of whom had led adventurous lives. For gold miners are a race apart. They don't work for wages. They're always expecting that they will meet their El Dorado.
Lowell, who grew up among gold miners in Colorado, was a bet-your-bottom-dollar, boom-or-bust kind of guy.
But Lowell's father wanted more for his son than just a search for adventure. The teetotaler town doctor helped shape the young man who would become the voice of America by feeding his mind books and drilling him in elocution.
He knew early on that he had a talent there that could be developed, and so he developed it. His father helped him.
He raced through college, earning 3 university degrees in 3 years, while at the same time working on a number of Colorado newspapers. Then he set off with the idea of becoming a lawyer, a profession that would utilize his voice. So, Chicago, law school, and some big city newspaper work.
In my younger days prior to World War I worked in the Windy City as a reporter. Crime on the West Side, Halsted Street, strikes, hangings, fires, Madam Schumann-Heink's divorce trial, politics, and so on.
As a reporter, he found himself swept up in the sensational journalism of the era. He had 2 scoops. One of them was actually true. It exposed a swindler and saved Chicago tycoons millions. Lowell's other big exclusive was a totally made-up interview with the secluded Morton Salt heiress. Chicago journalism in these years did not, shall we say, display a proper aversion to fabrications, such as Lowell's faked interview.
That was the Chicago of Carl Sandburg, city of the big shoulders, he called it. Carl and I were fellow reporters in those days, he on the Daily News, I on the Evening Journal. Two of our other fellow reporters were Ben Hecht and Charlie MacArthur of Front Page fame. Rough, tough Chicago.